There comes a moment, usually a quiet one, when you finally sit with yourself and admit a truth you've been circling for months, maybe years. That love, at least the kind you have been living, was never meant to hurt the way it does. Because love is supposed to be a refuge. Yet somehow it became the place where your chest tightens, and your voice fades, and your soul feels small. And the tragedy is that you kept telling yourself this was normal, that all relationships require sacrifice, that this ache was simply part of the deal, even though everything inside you kept whispering that something was off, something was heavy, something was breaking. You learned to survive the hurt, to rationalize it, to shape your needs into smaller shapes so they would fit into the narrow space the other person offered, and you convinced yourself that this shrinking was loyalty, and this silence was patience, and this exhaustion was proof that you loved deeply. But deep down you felt the truth, that real love doesn't demand the erosion of the self, because anyone can love you when you're convenient, but someone who truly loves you meets the full weight of your truth without turning away, and the pain you carried was not born from too much love, but from a love that kept asking you to disappear. There is a subtle grief in realizing that the relationship you fought for was built on hope more than reality, because so much of your energy went into imagining what things could be rather than acknowledging what they were. And you kept believing that if you just tried harder, gave more, bent further, the other person would soften, or stay steady, or finally see you. But people do not transform because we suffer for them. And the Stoics taught that love without clarity leads to attachment, and attachment without truth leads to pain. And pain without reflection becomes a cycle that repeats itself until we call it fate. You tolerated hurt because the good moments were so bright, so intoxicating, so full of promise that they made you forget the shadows that followed. And the contrast itself kept you hooked, not because the relationship was healthy, but because inconsistency can feel like passion when you've never experienced calmness as love, and the irregular warmth felt like proof that something meaningful existed beneath the surface, even though the warmth always disappeared, just when you needed it most, leaving you questioning your worth in the spaces where love should have held you gently. And still, you stayed. Not because you were weak, but because you were hopeful, and hope is a beautiful thing until it becomes a leash. And the Stoics would remind you that hope is only noble when it is rooted in reality, not in longing for someone's potential, and certainly not in longing for a version of love that only exists in memory, in imagination, or in the early days when everything sparkled with possibility. Eventually you begin to see that the pain you've been calling love was actually the cost of self-abandonment, and that love, real love, does not feel like cognitive dissonance, or constant second-guessing or emotional whiplash. Real love feels like steadiness, like clarity, like the soft exhale you didn't know you were holding. And the more you sit with that truth, the more your body understands it before your mind does. Because the body always knows when something is not safe. Even when your heart keeps trying to justify why you should stay. When you finally stop explaining away the hurt, you start to see the relationship with sober eyes. Not harsh, not hateful, just honest. And honesty isn't cruel. It is compassionate because it returns you to yourself, and that return is the beginning of healing. Because you can not heal in the same space that convinced you pain was part of the price of being loved. And the moment you realize that love doesn't require the sacrifice of your peace, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you forgot existed. This clarity doesn't come with fireworks or fury. It comes quietly, like a tide turning, like a dawn softening the night. And you begin to whisper to yourself, love wasn't meant to hurt like this. And the whisper becomes a truth, and the truth becomes a boundary, and the boundary becomes a doorway into a life where you no longer measure your value by how much you can endure. And perhaps the most healing realization is this. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. Because real love doesn't punish your vulnerability. It honors it. And real love doesn't ask you to settle for half presence or half effort or half truths. It shows up fully, willingly, consistently. And real love doesn't break you down. It builds you, gently, without taking pieces in return. So when you finally walk away, or even when you simply stop trying to convince someone to love you in a way they are not capable of loving, you are not giving up. You are growing up. You are waking up. You are remembering that love is meant to be a place where you can breathe, not a place where you learn to hold your breath until the storm passes. And as you step back into yourself, you discover that love wasn't meant to hurt like this. Not because love is perfect, but because love, in its truest form, does not wound the soul. It frees. Italiano.